We are the only publicly traded salt development company that's looking to put a salt mine into production. We're not limited by our resource, we're limited by the logistics element. That's what's preventing salt mines from being built. And we happen to have at Atlas Salt all the logistics pieces that line up, plus a great deposit that make us viable.
Some commodities dominate headlines, others quietly keep economies running. And every winter, governments rely on them to keep transportation networks moving. Manufacturers depend on them to produce everything from chemicals to pharmaceuticals. And entire industries simply don't function without them. Yet despite their importance, they rarely command the attention of investors. And one of those commodities is salt. Now, North America continues importing millions of tons every year while domestic supply becomes increasingly strategic. And at a time when governments are focused on reshoring supply chains and securing critical resources, it raises a pretty important question here. Has the market overlooked one of Canada's most compelling resource stories simply because it doesn't fit the traditional mining narrative? Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm your host, Lindsay Melchick, and joining me just to answer that question, clear as day, is someone who has spent his career evaluating billion-dollar mining projects from both an operational and financial perspective. Today, as CEO and interim CFO of Atlas Salt, he's leading the development of what could become one of North America's most significant domestic salt operations while challenging investors to really rethink the value of essential commodities that often hide in plain sight. Nolan, it's so great to have you here. I mean, this all started way back last year at, Pitch Battle, where you won the whole thing, and now here you sit on Markets and Market Frontlines.
Yeah, it's always good to chat with you, Lindsay. Thank you for that intro as well. And yes, a resounding yes answer to your question of, are we being overlooked because we're not traditionally sexy like gold or something like that?
Right? So I think one of the biggest misconceptions with investors have, when they hear about, salt, we'll say, they immediately assume it's just a low growth, low multiple business. Yet when you really strip away the label here, Nolan, this is really a conversation about supply chain security, infrastructure resilience, and commodity that governments and industries simply can't operate without. So have investors fundamentally misunderstood the opportunity, or has the industry simply done a really bad job at telling the story?
Well, yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I'll start with the second part first. Really, there's not a lot of people to tell the story, right? So when you talk about the industry telling the story, we are the only publicly traded salt development company that's looking to put a salt mine into production in North America. And there's only one other publicly traded salt producing company in North America. And the rest of the industry is primarily private or owned by private equity. So they kind of have an oligopoly position, including Compass Minerals' incumbency in the industry. And because of some of the things you mentioned earlier about it being a low margin product, they are comfortable with the competitive dynamic right now because they don't want to put one of their mines that is operating at the high end of the cost curve out of the business. Right. So they don't want to attract investment dollars. They don't want to attract any interest from government or regulators or anyone like that might start pushing for new mines. They're just happy to fly under the radar, make money hand over fist from the mines that they have operating, and leave people like us to champion the message. And we're a lone voice in the woods, but we're doing the best we can. And it's been quite successful since I started in raising the profile for the company. So yeah, salt is, as you mentioned, something that's used very much by every citizen pretty much daily. I mean, certainly everybody has salt in their foods. It didn't get there by chance. It was usually produced by a mine and made its way through agriculture, or in the winter, salt on the roads, especially in Eastern Canada and the northeast of the US. There's been a tremendous opportunity here, but what is, I guess, little bit different than typical mining projects is that we're not limited by our resource. We're limited by the logistics element. That's what's preventing salt mines from being built. And we happen to have at Atlas Salt all the logistics pieces that line up, plus a great deposit that make us viable. And so that is probably one of the things that people don't fully understand, and that we're trying to get out there, because it's not simply like looking at a deposit and having a high grade deposit and being able to mine it inexpensively. I like to say this: if you're in the middle of Nebraska or Iowa, you don't have a salt mine because you don't have enough customers or ability to get to those customers easily.
Well, Nolan, I'm going to challenge this just a little bit further here.
Sure.
If Atlas was developing a copper project with the same economics, the same infrastructure advantages and market fundamentals, do you think the company would be valued differently today? And if your answer is actually yes, what do you believe investors are missing when they look at the story then?
I do think that we would be valued a little bit differently. I would say that one of the standouts, though, of a SALT project is the extreme long-lived nature of the asset. So you use copper specifically. Copper does tend to come out of the gate with a little bit longer lifespan mines. 15 to 20 years is pretty good. For us, we're already sitting at 25 years in reserve, plus another 50 years of resource. So even that outpaces a copper mine. So copper mines will tend to have better traditional mining company economics, like a high NPV, a high IRR. Our NPV and IRR are attractive for industrial minerals, but the real standout is the long-lived nature of the cash flows, and the fact that you can bank on those cash flows for decades. That's not something you can do with a copper mine. So I would say we would be valued a little bit better still on the NPV basis, but we should be, if we take our cash flow multiples and how the traditional salt mines are valued, even much higher valuation than we are today as a salt company or as an industrial mineral company. So what's being missed is the awareness, right? It's not a sector that people are looking for. Like, how do I add salt to my portfolio, right? It's not a very common question people are asking.
That's right. Until now. Dun, dun,
yes.
dun. Okay, well, speaking of changing perceptions here, I know that your latest corporate update marks an important shift for the company. I mean, you're no longer talking about engineering studies or permitting milestones. You're actually talking about active construction, equipment mobilized, and earthworks already underway. So, Nolan, we're going to have to switch hats back and forth between CEO and CFO right now. From your perspective, what changes when a mining company crosses that line from planning into execution? I mean, what risks begin to disappear here? And just as importantly to that, what new risks suddenly come into focus for both management and investors?
Yeah, well, that's the big thing, right? I've been in the mining industry for 20 years. You cover a lot of mining companies. How many CEOs do you talk to that say, they're construction ready, or, they will be in construction very soon? And then you talk to them 6 months or a year later and nothing's changed. Nothing at all has changed, right? What's stopping you? For me, as an engineer, fundamentally, I like to build things. And I know that especially for a project like us to take a SALT project seriously, you have to demonstrate that you are actually advancing this thing and moving it along. Mm-hmm. And this is not just somebody had a deposit and they have to do something with it and they're trying to get interest for it. We're showing that we can build this thing. So it was very important to me to start the equipment at site, getting activity done. Now that does switch though, because of course now it's like, how do you keep things moving? Where's the money going to come from? I think that was what you're getting at with the CFO question. We've raised some money over the last year since I joined. We raised about $25 million, which is not something the company was in a position to do before I joined. But again, we've raised the profile of the company in the capital markets that we could do that. And that has detached our development plan a bit from the main project financing piece. But that risk still remains. Where is the bulk of the financing going to come from? And so we are working with lenders, as you know, as I've talked about in other interviews, to attract those lenders to the project. We believe that we can arrange 60 to 70% of our financing needs through senior secured debt, which would be a tremendous boon to the project because the cost of debt is so inexpensive. And then, of course, now it's not talking about permitting risk. You're not talking about stakeholder risk or indigenous risk or environmental risk or geological risk or exploration risk. You're talking about execution risk, which every project has if they intend to build. And that's really what's remaining for this project. Financing risk, which we're going to work through, and we've got a plan for it, and it's coming along quite nicely. That was also in the news release. And then execution risk. And, that's about putting the right people in place, the right designs, the right mitigation measures, and having the right engineering done.
Well, I'm going to stay with that update just for a moment more. One detail that really actually stood out for me wasn't actually the construction part, actually. It was the permitting. And you recently received a town development permit that streamlines future site development under a single municipal authorization. That's amazing news. And that's probably not a headline most investors really appreciate. But permitting delays we've seen it across mining. They completely derailed countless mining projects over and over and over again. So, Nolan, how meaningful is that milestone from an execution standpoint? And do you think the market really appreciates the value of removing regulatory uncertainty before major construction really ramps up?
Yeah, I don't think the market fully appreciates that. I mean, the first thing I would say is to remind people we have an improved environmental assessment. That's kind of the thumbs up from the provincial government that this project is advancing. We also had a full package of early works permits from the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador. But what was required was a town development permit application for each individual work package within that early works program. And this was set during the EA process, right? It was something we agreed to. The town said, we want to be consulted, not that we're going to have really much discretion to withhold it, but we think that the company should be asking us before they pulled a road in, or they cut trees down, or they develop a pad, or any type of individual activity. Now, we were diligently working through that process with them, and then they just came to us and said, guys, maybe we should just streamline this and just get just tell us everything you want to do in the next year or so under what's already been approved by the provincial government, and let's get that done. And it saves the company administrative burden, it saves the town administrative burden, and it gives us and investors the confidence that there's nothing going to hold things up. Even if a permit is like a day delayed, or somebody's on vacation and can't approve it, those start to add up over a project, and those have been completely eliminated. We have the full early works permit from the town development permits approved right now. And I think that that's a big vote of confidence too, an example of the stakeholder support we have in the region from all stakeholders that want this project to go ahead as well, that they're offering ways to streamline it instead of us asking and having to go through an adversarial process.
To hear that they actually came to you, that is huge. It's unheard of. So a massive congratulations for all of you there.
Thank you.
Let's zoom out for a second, because I think this speaks to something much bigger happening across the mining sector. As we know, governments across North America right now are talking about supply chain security almost exclusively through the lens of critical minerals. But essential industrial minerals rarely enter that conversation, even though economies simply don't function without them. Nolan, do you think policymakers have been looking at resource security through too narrow a lens? And if so, that conversation begins to evolve. Where does Atlas Salt fit into it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's another thing. I mean, I've spent most of my career in the gold industry. I'll start with that.
Yeah.
Gold itself is something that attracts tremendous amount of interest, but it's not something people really actually need, right? Like the average person doesn't need gold in their life on a daily basis. Extend that to the critical minerals that we're talking about: lithium, rhodium, scandium. Nobody's going to the store shelves and buying these things. If Canada is not producing these elements, yes, we're paying a little bit more for them from other countries, but really the citizens are not affected at the end of the day. Maybe some of our industries are. Not saying I don't support the development of Canadian industries or critical minerals or whatever we can to advance these types of projects. We should. Absolutely. But then you think about salt, and we are not a critical mineral, at least officially, in the eyes of the government. But if there's not salt, there's shortages. Economic activity slows. People aren't going out on the roads in the winter. People get upset with the government. They go to this Walmart and they can't find salt to salt their driveway. That to me seems much more critical than an abstract concept of we need to be producing more niobium in Canada or something like that.
Right.
Right. that's just my feeling on it. And then when you add up, again, what are policymakers talking about? They're talking about creating jobs. They're talking about generating economic activity, reshoring supply chains, and creating an export base that we can market to the world. If you look at it through that lens as well, Atlas SALT meets all the criteria for a critical mineral or a project that Canada and the provincial government should want to support. We have tremendous support on the permitting front, but we think that there's other support that is right now available to critical minerals or other types of initiatives that we should be able to tap into as well. So yeah, very, very good question, and I completely agree with it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot happening over there at Atlas, and I think that there's probably definitely more to come. So, Nolan, what's next? I mean, you are interim CFO right now, so there's, one topic for sure, but what else are investors going, what's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, of course, we're going to be finding a new CFO very soon as well. I'm a very busy guy, and I don't really want to be the interim CFO for much longer. So I'm incentivized to get that off my plate. And yeah, as we enter this major financing phase, having a new CFO on board will add a lot of weight to the process there, to attracting that funding that we are looking for. That process is well advanced, as I mentioned, so we expect to have it finalized by the end of the year, but we expect to have progress updates in addition to the one that we just put out yesterday, advising the market of interest that's being developed or expressed towards us, and some of the terms and the funding amounts and who's involved. All of that will be announceable in the coming months if we start hitting our marks or continue hitting our marks.
Well, Nolan, I am on the watch, that's for sure, and I really appreciate the conversation. I know that there's probably lots coming down the pipeline as well, so do come back and let's delve into those.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Absolutely. I've been speaking with Nolan Peterson, CEO and interim CFO of Atlas SALT. Now, the company trades on the venture under the symbol SALT, very catchy, on the OTCQX under SALQF, and of course on the Frankfurt under the symbol 9D00. I'll leave you with this. Investors often chase the commodities they believe will shape the future. But perhaps the better question is this: what are the commodities the future simply can't function without? I'm Lindsay Melchick, and this has been the Market Frontlines. If you want conversations that go beyond the headlines and challenge conventional thinking around the markets shaping our future, make sure you subscribe, because the best investment ideas often begin where the questions no one else is asking start. We'll see you next time.